This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
So over the years, I've sort of changed my opinion on some gear and stuff and changed my approach a little bit. I think partly this is down to sort of, I guess, Keith from 5 Watt World. I really like the sort of some of the philosophical stuff that he's talked about on this kind of, whether you're a collector or whether you're trying to make music with this gear, you know, all that sort of stuff. And then also, I think having a baby, not from me literally, but like my wife had a baby, over a year ago now, it's sort of made me think about things a bit. And then also having like a mortgage and stuff like that, where I think it makes sense to actually in the gear kind of world, we're used to a different style of talking about some of this stuff. So anyway, I had a question from Alec Bourne, MIDI mad scientist extraordinaire, and I think he'd seen in one of my videos that I talked about sort of moving away from the boutique pedals and toward off the shelf kind of stuff essentially. And I did a video. This video I started making this before I actually did a video talking about how the boutique pedal industry is sort of, I think, shrunk a bit. Basically because what used to be the boutique industry, like JHS, Wampler, folks like that, actually now their production methods, I think, are pretty much similar to your normal mass manufactured stuff anyway. What is left behind, more or less, is that you have this idea of kind of limited quantity made stuff, or stuff which has got improved mods and stuff like that. So for me, what I've kind of started to think is that I don't really want to be dependent on gear that I can't get again or replicate. I decided I don't want to be collecting gear with the idea that it accumulates in value. And this Vemuram TSV808 was like the last super expensive thing that I had, that I thought, well, I can actually use that to pay off a bit of the mortgage, and that would probably be more sensible than leave it on the shelf not playing it. And what kind of sealed the deal for me was that I plugged in a £39 pedal next to it, and now they don't sound necessarily totally the same or anything, but what I am noticing is that it doesn't really transform my playing at all, right? I sound like the same boring guy through both things, essentially. The TSV had more kind of lower mids, and I recognise that there are other pedals in the world that don't command that high price tag that could do that same thing. I'm thinking specifically, you know, if I wanted to get that sort of vibe, I'd probably get an MXR Timmy or a secondhand Timmy, or I might get, you know, if I really want to save money, something like the K-Line Pure Sky, which is a Timmy kind of rehoused. And I used to have a kind of set of qualms about whether it was, you know, morally okay to buy Chinese pedals and stuff like that. I don't really think in that same way anymore, because I recognize that basically all of the pedal industry borrows from the same kind of set of circuits and stuff. You know, you have Vemuram who are building like upscale versions of stuff, whether it's the Nobel's ODR1 with the shanks or whatever, or the Jan Ray, which is like a version of the Timmy. The Timmy itself is sort of like two circuits put together. I think it's like a tube screamer with a rat type EQ. You know, there's elements of all of these kind of pedal builders borrowing from each other to some extent or another, and there aren't that many unique circuits. So anyway, that was the idea for me, Alec, was that I didn't need to have money tied up in stuff which I could no longer get, and be dependent on pieces of gear that I wouldn't be able to replicate should anything happen to them. I find there's something, to me, in the state that I'm in, that I prefer to be able to get, you know, good tones or whatever, my tones, out of things that you can basically get off the shelf. And I have experienced this, as I've talked about, with the Boss BD, and I felt like that had as much, you know, tonal difference and reason for being as any of my other pedals. And, you know, now that I have a blues driver in the collection, I'm happy with that. I also have this rather rare-ish, unique-ish concept for a pedal, where you basically have an EQ pre-drive and post-drive. It's the Akai G drive. I first heard of this from Ben Adrian, and he kind of suggested that this is a good way to sort of learn about drives and how they kind of work, because essentially, I think, a lot of them are based around this idea of having a clipping stage, and you have an EQ that can be before clipping and maybe an EQ after, and that's kind of what most of these circuits are doing to some extent. Here you've got, you know, instead of having fixed resistor values and stuff like that, you just have your actual, you know, an EQ for a tone stack instead of something that's relatively fixed. So yeah, instead of relying on pieces of gear that I couldn't get again, instead of relying on gear that's not off the shelf, I'm not particularly buying into the idea that a limited edition, because it's scarce, means that I should buy it. Do you know what I mean? Because that is the idea of a limited edition thing, is literally just to help shift that product, right? So that for me is why, unless it's like a product which is actually doing something significantly different, like some of the boutique companies might have 2 pedals in one, so like the Keeley Tone Workstation, which is 3 pedals in one, that sort of thing makes sense to me, or putting kind of MIDI stuff into pedals, that sort of stuff. Or is it Matthews Effects as well, Alec, that you're a fan of, The Architect? You know, putting together things that are significantly different rather than just, you know, someone else's take on circuits that are readily available, whether that's a Boss DS1, whether that's a Boss BD, whether that's a Tube Screamer, whatever it is, instead of relying on the boutiqueness, you know, basically getting off the shelf stuff that works. You know, if these things work for Prince, they work for Yngwie Malmsteen, you know, I'm not either of those guys. I should probably be able to figure out how these things work, and I think probably the amp is just as important a factor, and even more important than all of that is like how you are playing, because ultimately I generally sound pretty similar whatever I'm playing through. So, you know, holding on to expensive pieces of gear just because they're rare no longer made any sense to me. So that for me is why I've moved away from this idea of, you know, limited edition boutique effects. Let me know if you're still someone who's really into that stuff or a collector. I think there's total validity, and when I see, you know, walls that are covered in pedals and stuff, as much as I don't think that's what I want to do, I still think it's a pretty cool thing. And you know, JHS is whatchamacallit, you know, pedal museum. I think it's a cool concept. It's just I don't have the money to do it, obviously. So in the idea here, are we really getting much different for our money with the Vemuram? I thought, let's check out the steel stringer. Gain on here at the moment, so let's back that off a bit. Got more volume coming from the Vemuram as well, I think. One of the things that's definitely happened with the steel singer is it's got that thing where it cuts off. Cutting off a bunch of low ends. Which comparatively is then making it seem a little bit thin next to the Vemuram. I think this is more or less quite close to a Timmy circuit from some emails that I've had.
face down on the Vemuram, there's a trim pot for it. But that is creating a definite difference in the feel between the two pedals, and obviously tonally as well. You're cutting off quite a lot more bass with the Steel Singer or a traditional tube screamer. The Vemuram is preserving that, I guess, a bit like a Boss SD1 might do, or a Timmy circuit, or like the Greer Lightspeed, K-Line, Pure Sky, these sorts of pedals, which, yeah, might be worth a look, I guess, if you're looking for a tube screamer type drive that is going to give you tones like this. A Timmy itself, of course, you don't necessarily need to spend as much as you go into on one of these to get this sort of result from a pedal. Anything Timmy flavoured will pretty much do it. I've managed to actually match this with a Timmy version 3 with quite a lot more success than this here, but yeah.